Thanks for tuning in at Brackies.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 5 in Make a Game, a cool little series on making a video game in Unity. So in this video we are going to add some shadowing to our game. We're going to add some real-time shadows. We're also going to talk a bit about lights and how they work. And then we're going to move on to making our ball die, or at least react whenever he falls down from his platform. So whenever the player fails and falls to infinity, we're gonna stop that and make him maybe respawn instead. So basically, let's start out by adding the lights here. So as always, I've opened up Unity. And we left off last time with a ball rolling around a little bit more exciting level. But as you can see, once we roll up here, there are no more lights. And the reason why we are still able to see what's going on up here is because of what is called ambient light. And ambient light is also called fill light. And it's basically how bright and what color the light is whenever we don't have a light. So it's basically the color of the shadows. And what we can do to adjust this is we can go up to the edit, hit render settings, and then you should see a setting called ambient light. And if we click this and drag it all the way down, we can make everything but the lit up parts black. This won't affect the skybox, of course. And this is great for horror games, but not really in a moody, fun little game like ours. So let's just leave this at a gray color, like it was before. But you can go ahead and play around with this. You can also tint it a bit blue if you would want the more, you want the color from the sky reflecting it. I might tint it just a tiny bit to the blue side there, and maybe make it a bit darker so we can have some more lights in there without it getting too blown up. But now that we have adjusted this, let's go ahead and look at how our light is set up. So currently we only have one light in our scene, and that is a point light emitting. And you might have noticed that if we go to the right hand side here, we can set it to have shadows. Though once we do, Unity will tell us that we need the pro version. And so if we are just gonna consider that we don't have the pro version, so let's just disable this light. And if we now want some shadows in there, in Unity 4.2, they added real-time shadows to directional lights in the free version. So that's really great. It helps your game look much better, and it's really an awesome feature. So let's go ahead and go to Game Object, Create Other, and now Directional Light, so we can get some shadowing in there. And if we have a look at our skybox, it looks like our sun is coming from somewhat behind us. So we can just go ahead and play around with this until you find it looking good. And I don't think this is too bad. You don't want to come in straight from the camera. And this is not going to be our only light source. But let's just maybe bump down the intensity to something like 0.3 or 4. Let's try 4. Yeah, this is looking pretty great now. And we can go ahead and add shadows. So go under the shadow type and hit hard shadows. And set the strength is fine at 1, and the resolution is fine as is. But what we can see now is we have a shadow on our ball. This is not that apparent because it doesn't have that many objects to cast the shadow upon. So what we can do is we can make our ground a little wider. And this is where it comes in handy, that we have made the ground a prefab, because we can simply take the scale of this Z axis and change this to 2. And then just hit apply, and it will change all the other ground objects too. So now when we play our game here, we can see that we have some nice shadowing coming from the ball, and this looks much better. So great. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and add some more things to our game. One quick note is that if you think this gets too blown up from one side, you can duplicate the directional light and rotate it to the other side and then just bump down the intensity, and this will make it look a little more realistic because now we have some light on the other side too. But for now, let's just not include that. Let's just let the ambient light take care of it. Okay, so let's rename this light to sun. And there we go. One thing you can do is if you want something to be in the top of the hierarchy and you know you're not going to be using it in a script, you can just make 2 spaces and it will go right up there. But I like to make an underscore instead, and it will also just be in the top of the hierarchy, so you can always find it. This is great for things that is always there and isn't changed. So that's a nifty little feature. Great, so let's save our scene, file, save scene, and let's delete our old light. There we go. Okay, so what we are going to be doing now is we want to make it so that our ball will respawn whenever it falls from one of the platforms. And we are going to do this by selecting our ball, hitting add component, going to new script, and whoops, I added the script without renaming it. Let's just try that one more time. Selecting the ball, hitting add component, new script, and let's call this ball health of type JavaScript, and hit create and add. Now we can go ahead and duplicate or double click this to open it up in MonoDevelop. Let me just explain, because there are several ways to do this. First off, we could have, let's see here if I can drag this. There we go. The first option is to use what is called a trigger collider. So a trigger. And what a trigger does is wow, that's extremely bad. But basically what a trigger does is it normally uses a box collider. So if we have a box here, and what it does, it is detects whether or not something enters the trigger. So if something should enter this, it won't collide with it, it will just go straight through. So if our ball enters this trigger, we can use a script checking that called on trigger enter. On trigger enter. And what we can do with this script is that we can use this to call some code. So if something enters the trigger, and if what enters is equal to a player or the ball, then we want something to happen. So on trigger is equal to the ball, then we want something to happen. Then we can make something happen down here in code. So we can place some code in here. This is what we want to happen, right? But this has some faults, because if our ball is falling so fast that that the trigger won't detect it, and that sometimes happens, then we have a problem, because then our ball will fall to infinity. So what we are going to be doing instead is we are going to be using the position of our ball, and that's done by using transform.position, transform.position, and what this will allow us to do is we'll just check for the Y position of the ball, which means the up and down value, so the up and down. And if we can just check that if that value is equal to, and then we can say, let's say minus 10 or less than, so less than or equal to, I'm sorry, more than or equal to minus 10, then we want something to happen. So instead of using a trigger and get this complicated setup, we will just check for the position of the ball and see if it's below what we want it to, and we can use a variable for this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our ball health, And we're going to delete this function start. We're not going to use that. And then we're going to make a variable called, let's say, max fall distance. And this is going to be equal to, let's say, minus 10. Now in our function update, let's make some space. And in here we can type if, and then this script is going to be sitting on our ball. So all we need to do to access it is type transform, and then we will get the position and rotation and all of that on the object the script is sitting on. So we're just going to be using transform, then dot position and dot y, because we only want to check for the y-axis. And if this is more than or equal to max fall distance, then we want something to happen. And let's just first off check if this is working, and we do that by typing in debug.log and then opening up some parentheses, and in here we can type test and close it up. And what this will allow us to do is, if we go back in our game, we should see a variable down here, no errors. And what it will do is, if we go to the console window, it will show this text, this test text. It will show test in here whenever that is called. So we can check if it's working by hitting play. And you can see just when starting out, we get a bunch of tests. And we really only want this to be called whenever we get below that distance. And the reason why is because this should be more than or less than or equal to, so like that. So if we are minus 10 units down or less or more, then we should call this debug.log test. And the reason why we use the less than is because this is in negative numbers, and that's why it can be confusing sometimes. If you don't get this right away, it's completely understandable. Just save this and we can hit play. And if we hit clear here, we can see there are no tests. And if we now roll our ball down and wait for it, and there you go, the test variable is called. So now once we get below the 10 units, it calls the test. And basically here we would make our ball jump back to whatever checkpoint we had reached. But since we haven't made checkpoints yet, what we're going to do is we're simply going to replay the level. So we're just going to make it load up the same level. And we do this by using application.load level. And load level, all this needs is the name of the level. So we are just going to type, I think I called it level 1. Let's just check in the project pane. Yeah, I called it level 1. So whatever you called it, we'll just copy paste that in there and close it up. So if this is still unclear, what we're doing is we are making a variable which is the max fall distance, and this is equal to minus 10 because we don't want it to get more than 10 units down. And then we check if we get below that distance, and if we do, we will reload the level we are on. So now let's save this, and this is not gonna work, but let's try it anyway. So let's hit play and make our ball fall down. And what's gonna happen now is, well, actually this worked, and that might be because this is our first level. If this isn't working and it's saying that you have to assign this level, then what you can do is you can go to the edit, the file, then build settings, and what you have to do is you have to add the scene into the build settings here. So just hit add current. And this does work because we only have one scene in there, but if we had multiple levels, it would throw an error. So simply we just have to make sure that all our levels are added, and if you add more than one, you can just drag them around to change the order in which they're played. So just hit add current, and yeah, we can see it working. So now we can try out our level. We can see it's beautifully lit up all the way. and let's say we don't make this jump. Oh, that's unlucky. Well, then we can just replay it. Great, so that was pretty much this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a lot of scripting, and we also got some light in there, and it's looking much better. So thank you for watching. And also, I would really like to see what you guys are making. So please go ahead and tweet to me at brackystweet.com. Let me just write that to you here so you can get it on writing. So brackystweet, not .com, so at brackystweet on Twitter, I mean. So write to me at brackystweet on Twitter. I would like to see pictures or updates on whatever game you are making, and you can also get some feedback, and it's fun for me to see what you're using the tutorials for. So please, if you're making a game, it doesn't have to be finished, just write work in progress or whatever. Write to me on Twitter, and I'll check out your game. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.